All right, today we're going to learn how to make a space scene that kind of looks like this in Unreal Engine without any blueprints, and probably the easiest way to make a space scene. That being said, before we get started, let's go ahead and leave this view, and let's go to the default layout for Unreal Engine 4 Classic. Okay, so I have this scene here, and I have this planet. We're going to create the atmosphere effect. We're going to add some planet textures and add this star map. To do that, what we're going to do is go down to our content browser, and we need to make a new level. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-S to save my project. Now we can right click in the empty space and click on level. We're going to add a new level to our project, but for this tutorial I already have a level already made. It would just be adding the level, naming it, and calling it Space Tut. So I'm going to double click this, and now we have this empty scene here. Holding right click and WASD, we can fly around, but there's no lights in our scene. We're going to go up to the selection mode here, or the quickly add to project panel. Doesn't matter, we just need to add a directional light. So we're going to type in DIR and add a directional light. And in the outliner, we see it's there. In our location, we're going to set this at world origin by clicking the back arrow there. So now the location is at 0, 0, 0. Hit F, cool, awesome. Now we also need to add an HDRI. So we're going to go into the place actors panel again, and we'll type HDRI, and we will take this, drop this into our scene by clicking and dragging, and for some reason it's taking a second. Come on, dude. There it goes. All right. So from here, we'll take the HDRI backdrop, same thing, zero it out on the origin. Now, in the details panel of our HDRI backdrop, we're going to go into the advanced properties. This menu right here might be collapsed. You can just reveal it right there. And in your mesh, basically the shape of your HDRI, the default is this weird teardrop thing. I don't know why, but we're going to type in SM_sky sphere. We need this guy. Now, it must be this sphere versus other spheres. And the only reason why is that sometimes with the HDRI backdrop, if the direction of the polygon is facing the incorrect way, when you're inside the HDRI backdrop, it won't project correctly because the HDRI backdrop is effectively just a big sphere. So that being said, let's just make sure that we use the SM sky sphere. That will help make sure that you get the star map correctly. Now, we need to add the star texture to this scene. What we're going to do is in our content folder, I always just right click in the empty space, add new folder, and add a folder for my HDRI backdrops. Now what you do need to do is have some sort of star texture, and if you mouse over any of these textures I have, you'll see that the compression setting really closely is in HDR compressed. You'll also notice that the file type is a texture cube. That's important because the HDRI backdrop object will only accept .hdr files or texture cubes. To demonstrate this, let's go ahead and take this HDR and drop it on the cube map, and now we have this star texture. Awesome. Now, if you don't know where to get a star map, I get these star maps from Grayscale Gorilla just because I find them to be the most pleasing for motion graphics, VFX, visual production, etc. But if you go to the internet, you can go to the NASA website or go to the internet and find on Reddit probably some star map here. So I have this one from NASA because space. And we can go ahead and see that I have it here, drop it on, same thing. I personally think this looks worse. Granted, it is a 4K map, but that being said, I feel like it's a little busy. Now, if you download any of these textures from the NASA site, you'll notice that the file type is going to be a JPEG, a PNG, or a TIFF file. So let's go ahead and download the JPEG really quick. Right click, save image. Star map 8K. Cool. Now, if I were to go into my Unreal project and drop in this star map JPEG, like so, if I try and drop it onto the cube map, it's not going to work. We're not going to cover the other workarounds to use a JPEG. So what you would need to do is open Photoshop. And just to quickly demonstrate this, you'll bring the 8K JPEG star map into your scene, go to File, or Image rather, Mode, set this to 32 bits. Now from here, we'll go to File, Save As, Now we need to make sure that in wherever we're saving this, the save as type is set to radiance right here. Doesn't matter that it's a JPEG, we're just basically saying convert this to a .hdr file. The default will probably be Photoshop, but it must be in 32 bits per channel, that image mode thing that I just showed you, to make sure we can save it as a .hdr file. You can also do this with After Effects, which is what I normally do, but most people hate After Effects. All right, so with that saved, let's go ahead and go to my downloads folder here. And if I hit F5, it should save the 8K map right there. It's 120 gigabytes for some reason. It's a large map, but let's go ahead and take this, drop this into the project.
A few moments later.
Just for posterity's sake, I tried to import the JPEG, but unfortunately, for some weird reason, when I downloaded this image as a JPEG, it didn't import when I converted it to an HDR. So what I did do is download the TIFF version and then do the same thing, bring it into Photoshop, save it as an HDR, which is going to be this texture cube. And now I can drop this onto my HDR, and that looks pretty good. Cool. So that being said, make sure you download the TIFF file if you're downloading the thing from NASA. There's the star map. We have our star map here. Cool. Now we're going to go ahead and add a sphere, which will be our planet. So we're going to go into our Place Actors panel. We'll clear out the search and we'll type in sphere. And we can just go ahead and drop this into our scene. And we will zero out the location. We're going to hit F on the keyboard. And there's a problem here. I don't like using the default sphere in Unreal because look at all these weird jaggedy edges. It looks gross and terrible. That's a polygon issue. We're going to deal with that in a minute, but we're just going to use this as a reference point for now. So the first thing we're going to do with this sphere is we'll type planet. So we'll select the sphere in our outliner. We'll hit F2 on the keyboard, just renaming it, and we will call it a planet. Cool. Now we're going to Control D on the keyboard with the planet selected, and we're going to make a duplicate of the planet, and we're going to parent it under the main planet. And now with this planet 2, we will right click, hit F2 on the keyboard to rename it, and we will call this atmosphere. Cool. Now we're going to hit Control-Shift-S on the keyboard to save our project, and we're going to go into our materials folder. Now I have this atmosphere material, but we're going to go ahead and make it from scratch so you know what buttons to press. Before we do that though, I'm going to go into my atmosphere and just make sure that the size is set to 1.025 on all axes, because it has to just be a little bit bigger, because if you think about it, the atmosphere of a planet is just slightly bigger than the actual physical mass of the planet. So that being said, let's right click in the empty space, go to materials, and we'll call this M atmosphere tut. Hit enter, Control-Shift-S, and we can double click on this atmosphere tut to open it, and we can go ahead and maximize this window and visualize our material. So we need to add a lot of nodes, so let's get started. Let's hold right click and click in the empty space. We can move our node space around. We're going to hold the number 3 key on our keyboard and then left click in the empty space to add a constant 3, which is basically going to be a color. Let's right click on this, convert to parameter, and call this atmos color. There we go. Now from here, we can go ahead and pipe this into the base color. Now I realize we need to select our main material property here and then set the blend mode to translucent. Now from here, we're going to hit the M key on the keyboard and hold the M key. And that's going to make a multiply node. We'll take the atmosphere color and pipe this into the A, and then the multiply into the emission color there. Now we're going to hold the 1 key on the keyboard, and we are going to set this to 5 for now. We're going to right click on this constant vector node that we just made, set this to a parameter, and we'll call this emission strength. Cool. And set this into the B value. Now, let's go ahead and set the atmosphere color to white just for now. Now, from here, we're going to go ahead and add another multiply node. And then we're going to hold M again and click in the empty space and add another multiply node. Now, in the empty space, right click and we'll type in FRES. We're going to add a Fresnel node. And basically, what that's going to do is help us catch the edges of our material. So we can take this Fresnel that we just made and pipe this into the first multiply node here. And then from here, we're going to take this multiply node and pipe this into the B value. Now, this property is going to actually receive the color here. And now from here, we'll take this multiply node and pipe this into the opacity. So now we're going to get a little bit of like a soft fading effect around, but we want this to be a little bit more intense. Now, what I don't like about the Fresnel node is these descriptions are not very clear of what's happening. So I'm going to hold the 1 key on the keyboard and click in the empty space twice and create 2 constant vector nodes. We will select a box around it by clicking and dragging, right click and set convert to parameter. Now in this bottom one, we'll call this base reflect, like so. And this top one, we'll call this exponent in. Now we can take this first one, pipe it into the first property, but let's go ahead and register the value of the Fresnel node, which is 5. So we'll make sure that we pipe that in and then set this value to 5 to the default value, then this base reflect. If we mouse wheel forward, we can get a little bit closer and right click to move our node space around, pipe this in and set this to 0.04. So now we're basically getting the same effect, but when we adjust this in the later part of the tutorial, we can do it a little bit more procedurally and save us some time. So now we have this faded effect around our sphere, but what we want to do is have this sphere respond to the light in our scene. To do that, we're going to right click in the empty space and we're going to type in sky, atmosphere, light direction. And then we're going to click in the empty space again and we'll type in vertex, normal world space, like so. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and right click in the empty space and we'll type in dot product. Now, this is math stuff. We can go ahead and take this first sky atmosphere, pipe this into the dot A, and then the vertex normal WS into the B, and then the dot product into the multiply node, the B slot right here. So now we have this effect of the Fresnel node only being affected wherever the light is pointing, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit the save button here, and we can go ahead and take this atmosphere and see that it pretty much matches my practice here. We'll take this and put this on the material of the atmosphere of our objects in our scene. So now it should give us a little bit of a halo effect. Now, one thing we need to be very clear about planets and these traditional static mesh in Unreal is that if we go to our lit mode and set this to wireframe, we just don't have enough geometry here, which is giving us these weird shadow problems. What I recommend you do is you actually go to some other 3D software. I'm just using Blender in this tutorial. You could do this in Cinema4D, Maya, 3ds Max, etc. We'll hit Shift A on the keyboard in the empty space. We'll go ahead and add a sphere, UV sphere, like so. And we're going to go ahead and add a fair amount of segments to this. Let's go ahead and set this to like 128. So it's going to get nice and soft. We'll set this to 128 as well. And now we have a really dense sphere. If we middle mouse button, we can orbit around, right click, shade auto smooth. We have a really soft sphere now. Awesome, cool. Let's go ahead and apply our smooth by angle, sure, and let's go ahead and file, export, FBX, and just drop this onto my desktop. Sphere tut, export, FBX, cool. Now in my project in Unreal, we'll go to FBX and we will find that thing that we just added, and sphere tut. It's a little big, but who cares? Unreal is magic like that. It's not that big of a deal. We will drag in that sphere into the empty space of our content browser, and now we have the default FBX import. Let's go ahead and import all, not a big deal. And now we have a sphere in our scene. The reason why we do this is because we also get, if we go back into Blender and go to UV editing, we can see our UV is just an even projection, and it's pretty dense, but it's an even projection across our sphere, which is what we want if we apply some generic materials to our spheres for planets. So I'm going to take this sphere that we just imported, and in the default sphere that we added, we can take this, Control-Shift-S to make sure we save it to our project, drop this into the static mesh of the details panel of our main planet, and then we can see that the shadows did clean up just a little bit, and we'll also go to the atmosphere and replace that static mesh. So now it's just a little bit bigger, and that cleaned up the shadows just a little bit, but I still don't like it. So what I'm going to do is hold Control L, first find an angle that I like, and then I'm going to go into my directional light, and I'm going to go ahead and type Ray, and set the Cast Ray Trace Shadows from Use Project Settings to Enabled, and that should really clean up that shadow a lot more. So from here, we can go into our directional light, and then increase the source angle to like 10, and now that's really giving us a much softer shadow across our planet. So I know we took a quick little deviation into the geometry. Let's go ahead and go back to that material really quick for our atmosphere. Now, we are going to click on the material of our folder of our content and right-click on the material tut that we just made. We made this just a moment ago, and we're going to set this to a material instance. And we can just hit enter, and now this is a copy of our material, but if we go into it, a lot of the parameters that we set inside the material are now accessible inside our material, so we can just use some sliders. So we can go ahead and turn everything on by clicking on these checkboxes, go to the atmosphere color, and I always find space render to be like slightly blue, so I'll just set this to a little bit of a light blue color. And the reason why we set the parameters for the Fresnel is now we can adjust the intensity. So this base reflect is kind of hitting the edges and making the edges a little bit more intense and removing the softness on the inside. And then we can increase the emission strength, make it brighter, and then set the exponent in to affect how deep that glow or our atmosphere is going to be affected. So with all of that being said, we can now preview our render, and our planet is still white. The best way to get a planet render in Unreal is to have materials for your render. Hello my friends, Future Jags here. I realize I wasn't very clear as to why I suggest getting your own materials for planets online. So just to quickly demonstrate, you could very well go up to the quickly add to project menu, go to Quixel Bridge, and find some asset that you think could work. So like, let's say, just be really abstract, we have this road asphalt, and maybe this could look like a planet like Mercury or something like that, something that doesn't have a lot of water or continents or something. So I could go ahead and add the road asphalt by downloading it and then clicking the add button into my project. So now in the content browser of my project, I have this road asphalt, and then I can just drag this new material that I have from Megascans onto my planet and just bring it into the material slot of our details panel here. And when we do that, okay, that's kind of cool, but it definitely looks a little big. So you can double click on this and double click on the material and basically adjust your global tiling to try and get the look that you may want. So let's say we set this to like 10 and 10, maybe we'll set it to like 3 and 3. That's a little better, but even then, the reason why I don't suggest just trying to slap some material on a planet in Unreal is that Unreal just generally benefits from using assets that are for their intended use case and not trying to go into some crazy procedural node building thing. So that being said, this is why I suggest finding some assets online. It will take you more time to try and open up a material and do your own sort of like crazy node nonsense after the fact. So that being said, let's go back to past jags. Again, you can very well use a Megascans material, jump in, maybe try adding some normal strength and really crank it. But even then, it's just not going to look as good as getting something that's built for that purpose. What I recommend you do is go to the internet, and we will go to my favorite site for planets. And I'm not sponsored by them, but Production Crate. And we will go to the 3D AR and type in planet. and you can find all of these awesome planet assets. They do cost money. I am not sponsored by them, but it is the easiest way to get some really good looking planets, and they also come in like 8K. I think they even come in 16K. So just for posterity's sake, I have this FBX folder here. I have this planet, and this static mesh that the asset comes with is basically just a glorified sphere. It's just a pretty standard sphere. If I go to my lit mode and go to wireframe, it's just a standard sphere that's just really, really dense, like so. We just made that same sphere, but the benefit about using the assets that's created by Production Crate is it also comes with materials. So I'm not going to show you how I made the planet material because they made it, but I can go ahead and click on my planet and replace my material and just drop it in, and hey, look, that's a cool looking planet. Pretty straightforward because a planet is effectively a sphere. Now, this does not look like the beginning of the video. The very last thing that we need to add is a post-process volume. So we're going to go into our Place Actors panel, and we're going to type in Post-Process Volume, drop this into our scene, and in the search panel of our post-process volume here, we're going to type UNB and set this to infinite extend unbound. This is going to make sure that the post-process volume affects everything in our scene. So now what we can do is we can enable bloom, which will really help level up this planet look, because right now the atmosphere looks a little flat. So when we turn on the bloom option and just crank this up, we can see that we're getting a much softer glow effect around our planet, which is exactly what we want. We see those typical renders that you'll see from Star Wars, whatever. A lot of the times the atmosphere is glowing. So what I can do is I can go into my atmosphere and I can double click on the material here and make sure that I actually replace the material with the instance that we just made. So the fastest way to do that would be go into your material, hit the little folder magnifying glass, and navigate to where that folder is. And now I have this instance, and just go ahead and replace it like so. And now we have this glow effect of our atmosphere around our planet. But we are going to crank it up a little bit more. First thing I'm going to do is go into my scale of my atmosphere, and I'll make this a little bit smaller, set this to like 1.015, just so it's hugging that planet a little bit more. And then I'm going to go into my post-process volume and intensity and really crank that bloom to a much higher value. This is maybe not getting super realistic, but I'd say it looks pretty cool. So now when we deselect that, it looks like the atmosphere is kind of hugging the planet, but when we're looking straight on, we're actually getting the material of the planet itself. Now the benefit of this workflow is that when we select our atmosphere and go into our material, we can go ahead and adjust some of these values to get a different look. So I can just go ahead and deselect our planet so our selection doesn't affect our look, and just like really just crank some stuff up until I get the look that I want. I can increase our exponent in. I can even set this to like red if we're making like Mercury or something, and I'd say that looks pretty cool. Now, the last benefit and the reason why we made this crazy material is that when we go ahead and save that, oh god, it got wild. Why did it do that? Undo that, undo that. Anywho, the reason why we do it this way is with that weird crazy node tree, if we hold Control L, our sunlight is only going to show the atmosphere wherever the sun is facing. So that's kind of how it would look. So if you wanted to get that cool cinematic shot of like the silhouette of another planet, or like you're on the dark side of the planet, you can just like kind of position the sun over there, and then you can go ahead and increase your emission strength and your exponent in, and get the look that you want for your atmosphere on your planet. So now from here you can go ahead and add a camera by clicking on the three hamburger lines. Go to create camera here, Cine Camera Actor, perspective, Cine Camera Actor here, and let's set this to like a 24 millimeter and kind of position this over there, and we have a really cool looking effect. Now the post-process volume is really driving a lot of this, especially the bloom, so you can go in and increase or decrease the bloom. You can also set the method to convolution, but this will slow down your renders a little bit. I do keep it at standard because this is just the easiest way I found to get a nice cool looking effect. And if you go into your lens flares, you can go ahead and affect these lens flares as well by turning this on and increasing or decrease the intensity. I typically keep this pretty low. You can also increase the amount of the bokeh size, which actually gives us this really cool halo, like bloom effect across our frame as well. So, okay. That being said, long tutorial, but I hope this one was helpful because we learned how to make a space scene, and this is kind of how I made, go in here. Hey, look, it's a little Earth scene that I made, and it's going to be super big, but hey, look, Earth, same exact material, same exact workflow. I just had some Earth textures, and you can find them linked in the description down below because I believe NASA gives some away. So, all that being said, hope this was helpful. If it was, let me know in the comment section down below. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever else. Comment section is down there for that as well. And I will leave you with the final tip. Eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Bye, my friends. Bye.